Okay, let's talk about warlords. I've heard a lot of people say that they think if we abolished the government, warlords would rise up and form a new authoritarian government, mafia, or gang. Basically, just some powerful entity that will take away control over everything. But here's the thing. This would never happen. Certainly not in the modern day. And that's why I'm making this video, to show you how absurd a warlord takeover would be. What I want to do is walk through a scenario, step by step, to see what would actually happen if the government was abolished. People just assume that things would happen a certain way, but we're really going to get into the specifics of it. And if you disagree with any of these steps, I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments. So let's get right into it. To be clear, this example is one of a hostile takeover, not a market takeover. The idea of a market takeover requires a different video altogether. In this scenario, powerful institutions try to take over the US through force, not through voluntary market means. In the year 2020, the United States government is abolished, leaving a power vacuum in its wake. The three richest men, Jeff Bezos, owner of Amazon, Elon Musk, owner of Tesla and SpaceX, and Bernard Arnault, the owner of LVMH, decide to join forces to establish control over the territory and fill the power vacuum. It should be noted that this isn't even realistic, but I'm willing to grant this scenario for the benefit of the opposition. In reality, all public land and property would be sold into the market, giving the vast majority of the US landmass an owner. There wouldn't be a power vacuum, since the power would all be decentralized. So, let's get into their plan of becoming a powerful warlord institution. So this is their strategy. Bezos is going to hire the largest and most capable PMCs, private military groups or companies, equipping them with the most advanced weaponry, vehicles, and technology. Amazon's logistics network is going to be converted into military supply lines, ensuring steady provisions of weapons, food, and medical supplies to his forces. Musk is going to leverage Tesla's and SpaceX's technology to create advanced drones, autonomous vehicles possibly, or just normal vehicles, and surveillance systems for military use. And then Arnold is going to use his wealth to attract elite mercenaries and military leaders, offering lucrative contracts and luxury benefits. LVMH's media assets will be used to produce propaganda, boost the morale of the troops, and spread fear among their opponents. Their plan is to target major cities, focusing on securing infrastructure like ports, airports, and key transportation hubs. They're going to try and control areas with essential resources, such as energy production sites, water supplies, etc. They will continue to coordinate their private armies to launch simultaneous assaults on key locations, overwhelming local resistance. Musk's advanced surveillance and autonomous systems will provide real-time intelligence, allowing for effective and precise strikes. Bezos' forces are going to secure logistical hubs and communication centers, ensuring the flow of information. Musk's drones and satellite systems will be used for continuous surveillance, enabling rapid response to any resistance. And Arnold will offer luxury goods and financial rewards to loyal followers. So, once the trio gets their forces into the land, they're going to immediately impose martial laws in the occupied territories, with strict curfews and harsh penalties for resistance. They're going to establish puppet local governments, staffed by loyalists, who are going to enforce their policies. Once initial territories are secured, the trio will gradually expand their control, targeting strategically important regions. They're going to exploit regional rivalries and offer incentives to local leaders to ally with them, using divide and conquer tactics to weaken the opposition. Controlled territories will be exploited for resources, with profits used to further strengthen their military and governance structures. The population in occupied territories may be subjected to forced labor and conscription to offer support in the war effort. Okay, So that's the plan. That's what they're assuming is going to happen. Basically, right now, they're in the initial stage. They're planning what's going on. They're having meetings about this. They're getting their forces ready. They're buying equipment. So what's the defense? What's going to stop these guys from actually following through with the plan? Let's get to the layers of market defense. Rationality. The first layer of defense against the modern day warlords is rationality. The three richest men in the world are not stupid. Quite to the contrary, they are smart, organized, and pro-social, whether that's real or not. Otherwise, their businesses wouldn't have grown to such a tremendous level. If you agree that these men made the majority of their money through voluntary means, this means, by definition, they were providing customers and consumers with a product that they found valuable. Otherwise, they would not have purchased it. These men have spent most of their lives creating powerful businesses from the ground up, elevating them to levels that the vast majority of consumers consider worth their money. They understand that to become powerful, they need to make the consumer king. They want to make a profit, which is why they'll do whatever it takes to gain the most profit. Violence is the opposite of profitable. In every case of violence, there is a far more profitable, peaceful solution. So let's get into this. Many people will actually think that violence is profitable, but this is actually a stupid point, so I'm going to rebut it right now. While violence sometimes appears as a means to quickly gain control or achieve short-term goals, it isn't profitable for several reasons. And when I say profitable, I mean that it can be short-term profitable, such as if you take over an area, a community area, like a group of houses or something. Yes, you immediately gain that wealth, you gain those assets, but it is not profitable for the long term. So let's get into the first point. Economic costs. Maintaining an armed force, procuring weapons, and ensuring logistical support are enormously expensive. The cost of soldiers' salaries, equipment, and supplies can quickly drain financial resources. Violent conflicts often result in significant damage to infrastructure such as roads, buildings, and utilities. Rebuilding and repairing these damages incurs high costs. Violence creates an unstable environment, discouraging investment and disrupting trade. Businesses face increased risks and operational challenges, leading to reduced economic productivity. Conflict results in loss of life, injury, and displacement of skilled workers. This loss diminishes the labor force and hampers economic development. The thing about businessmen, and you can agree with this or not, but businesses rarely invest their money into areas that are highly dangerous. They would rather move their businesses to places where crime is low, people are wealthy, consumers are safe. These are things they need. This is why it's extremely stupid to invest in war efforts, because the profitability is usually negative. So let's get into social and political costs. Violent regimes often face persistent and organized resistance from the population, which leads to continuous conflict and instability. These movements can be costly to suppress and prolong unrest. Using violence to govern erodes the legitimacy of the authority. Without public support, maintaining control becomes increasingly difficult and expensive. Violence against civilians and human rights abuses draw international condemnation, leading to sanctions, embargoes, and loss of global support. The morale of both the enforcers and the general population deteriorates under violent regimes, leading to decreased productivity and potential defections within the ranks. So not only is it economically costly, but it's socially and politically costly. People generally don't want to get involved in violence because violence is going to hurt them. It's extremely simple. People try to avoid fights, okay? You can call them whatever you want, scared, weak, afraid, it doesn't matter. People avoid conflict. Most people want to live in peace. And I know that's an extremely hard concept for a lot of people to understand. But I genuinely believe that most people want peace, and you can see this demonstrated in most people's lives. Most people don't commit crime. Most people just do the things that they do so that they can get by. They work jobs, they have families, they have friends. Most people just want to live peaceful lives. I hope that's not too controversial to say, but I know there's going to be lots of people who say that's stupid, that's idiotic, whatever. Then there's political costs, okay? There's going to be international governments, right? We're not saying the entire world is going to be abolished. The entire world government's going to be abolished. This is only in the US. There's going to be other nations around the world that are going to see this violence, and they're not going to like to associate with violent, irrational institutions. Then there's long-term strategic costs. While violence may achieve immediate control, it's not sustainable long-term. Continuous violence breeds further conflict and instability, making lasting governance difficult. Trust between the governing authority and the populace is crucial for stable governance. Violence destroys this trust, making peaceful and cooperative interactions almost impossible. And this is another point that shouldn't be too controversial. If a criminal comes up and steals your wallet, are you going to trust this person? No, you're not going to trust that person. Are you going to want justice against that person? Yes, you will definitely want justice against that person. And if you see them running around, you're not going to let them go free. You're not going to ignore them. You're going to do something about it. So yes, violence breeds violence. If somebody violently assaults you, you're going to want revenge or justice. You're not going to be completely fine with them walking around free. So violent regimes often face international sanctions and trade embargoes, isolating them economically. This isolation restricts access to global markets, technology, and investments. Again, people aren't going to invest in you if you are violent. Let's get into some historical examples. This is just to prove that violence is unprofitable. The American Civil War. The war cost the Union and the Confederacy approximately $5.2 billion, which is about $80 billion today. The South's infrastructure was particularly hard hit, with widespread destruction of railroads, factories, and farms. About 620,000 soldiers died, along with an unknown number of civilian casualties, leading to a substantial loss of workforce and economic productivity. World War I. The war cost the global economy approximately $208 billion, equivalent to about $3.6 trillion today. Much of Western Europe's infrastructure was devastated. France and Belgium experienced significant destruction of farmland, factories, and towns. Around 16 million people, including soldiers and civilians, were killed, and millions more were injured, leading to a substantial loss of human capital and workforce. Again, $3.6 trillion is a tremendous amount of money to lose. So let's get into World War II. The world cost the global economy an estimated $1.6 trillion, equivalent to approximately $27 trillion today. Cities across Europe and Asia were heavily bombed, with massive destruction of infrastructure. Germany alone saw the destruction of around 20% of its housing stock. Over 70 million people, including civilians and soldiers, were killed, leading to a massive loss of workforce and human capital. Then we have the Vietnam War. The US spent around $168 billion in the war, which is equivalent to around $1 trillion today. This war resulted in the deaths of over 2 million Vietnamese civilians and soldiers, as well as more than 58,000 American soldiers. The war left Vietnam's economy in ruins, with extensive damage to infrastructure and agriculture, and it led to a prolonged period of economic hardship. Then we have the Iraq War. The US spent approximately $2 trillion on the Iraq War, which, including direct military costs, veteran care, and interest on borrowed funds. Iraq's infrastructure was severely damaged, including water and electricity systems, schools, and hospitals. The war resulted in the deaths of over 100,000 Iraqi civilians and thousands of coalition troops. The conflict also displaced millions of people, disrupting the labor force and economic productivity. Then we have the Syrian civil war. The war has cost Syria an estimated $226 billion in GDP losses as of 2016, with further ongoing costs. Extensive destruction of homes, schools, hospitals, and other infrastructure has occurred. Entire cities like Aleppo, I think it's Aleppo, have been severely damaged. Over 500,000 people have been killed, and more than 6 million have been internally displaced, with an additional 5 million fleeing as refugees. This has decimated the workforce and disrupted economic activities. Then there's the Napoleonic Wars. The wars cost major European powers, Britain, France, Austria, Russia, and others, an estimated $6.5 billion, which would be equivalent to hundreds of billions of dollars today. Extensive destruction occurred across Europe, particularly in France, Spain, and Russia, where the scorched earth tactics left vast areas devastated. Over 3.5 million soldiers and civilians were killed, leading to significant demographic impacts and a loss of labor. If you still believe that violence is profitable, I don't know how else to convince you. And honestly, you're probably not going to be able to understand the rest of this video. So for those of you who do understand that war and violence are not profitable, let's keep going. This is all just to say that for the top 3 richest men in the world, to become warlords goes against everything they know. They need to understand that they're going to lose a lot of money to do this. So their motivation can no longer be a profit incentive. This means arguably their only reason for becoming warlords is now taken away. If they wanted to become warlords so that they could get more money, then that motivation is now gone. So now you need a new motivation for them. And the only motivation that could really be left is a vapid grasp for power. They don't care about the consequences. They don't care about the profit motive. All they care about is just raw authoritarian power. They just want to rule. And that is a irrational, extremely stupid motivation, but that's what we're going to give them for the remainder of these defenses. So with that being said, let's talk about the second layer of defense: reputation, investors, and consumers. Business owners are so sycophantic to consumers that they will use every method within their means of gaining consumer approval, no matter how stupid it is. Many retail franchises even allow theft to occur for the simple fact that they're afraid of the possible ramifications. Modern businesses are so ingratiating to consumers, they'll even use tokenism in every aspect of their businesses to gain the approval of most consumers. You would have to be an incredibly ignorant person to think that businesses actually care about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Something we can agree on is that businesses are in it for profit, and that's why they're so deferential to ideas they don't even believe in. And why is all of this? For one thing, their reputation. Reputation is perhaps the single most powerful tool in a company's sales. It doesn't matter if you think companies are good or evil. You cannot deny that they prioritize their reputation and then their profits above all else, especially over short-term profits. I think a lot of people actually believe that companies prefer short-term profits over long-term profits. This is not true, and we're going to talk about some examples why this is not true. The Tylenol crisis in 1982 with Johnson & Johnson. In 1982, 7 people died after taking Tylenol capsules laced with cyanide. Johnson & Johnson promptly recalled 31 million bottles of Tylenol, costing the company over $100 million. They also introduced tamper-proof packaging and communicated transparently with the public. Johnson & Johnson's decisive and responsible actions preserved their reputation, and the company's market share, which had plummeted during the crisis, recovered swiftly. This is a textbook example of protecting corporate reputation. Only 7 people died. That's nothing to a company this big. And they spent over $100 million and considerably more just to make things right. That is a devastating blow to short-term profits. So you would have to be idiotic to think that they actually care more about short-term profits than long-term profits. Okay, moving on to Toyota. Recall crisis in 2009. Toyota faced a major crisis due to reports of unintended acceleration in some of their models, leading to accidents and fatalities. The company recalled over 9 million vehicles and temporarily halted production and sales of 8 models. Toyota also launched a massive public relations campaign to address safety concerns. Toyota's reputation suffered initially, but their quick response helped restore consumer confidence. By addressing the issue quickly and transparently, they were able to eventually recover the brand reputation and their position in the market. Then we have the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill resulted in the largest marine oil spill in history, causing an extensive amount of environmental damage. BP faced severe backlash due to the mishandling of the crisis and an inadequate initial response. The company eventually committed over $60 billion, $60 billion, to cover the cleanup costs, fines, and compensation. BP's reputation took a significant hit, leading to a drop in stock prices and long-term brand damage. They still spent $60 billion to try and make things right. Now, I cannot think of a better example of a company that prefers long-term profits over short-term profits, because losing $60 billion is an immense loss. But that just goes to show how much they care about their reputation. Let's talk about Volkswagen. The emissions scandal in 2015. Volkswagen was found to have installed software in diesel engines to cheat emissions tests, affecting around 11 million cars worldwide. Volkswagen faced legal actions, recalls, and had to pay over $30 billion in fines, settlements, and buyback costs. The company also launched initiatives to restore trust, such as investing in electric vehicle technology. Volkswagen's reputation was damaged during this time, leading to a significant drop in sales and market value. It took years to rebuild back the trust. So again, this is another company paying $30 billion in fine settlements and buyback costs. Essentially, that's $30 billion of trying to make things right. Then we have Apple with the privacy stance of 2016. Apple refused to comply with a court order to unlock an iPhone belonging to a suspect in the San Bernardino terrorist attack, citing user privacy and security concerns. Apple stood firm on its commitment to user privacy, arguing that creating a backdoor would set a dangerous precedent and undermine security for all users. While controversial, Apple's stance reinforced its reputation as a company that prioritizes customer privacy, even over a court order. So this is the question: why do companies put so much resource allocation into their reputation? Simple. Because businesses value long-term gains over short-term gains. Again, just look back at all the examples I provided. If companies valued short-term gains more, they wouldn't have committed to such damage control. They wouldn't have paid tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars just to make things right, to protect their reputations. It's because they value their reputations more than they do short-term costs. What is a reputation equivalent to? A reputation is equivalent to long-term profits. What about consumers and investors? What happens when investors and consumers don't like what's happening with a company? Let's talk about Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica scandal of 2018. It was revealed that Cambridge Analytica had harvested data from millions of Facebook profiles without user consent, influencing elections and violating privacy. User trust in Facebook plummeted, with many users threatening to delete their accounts. The Delete Facebook movement gained momentum as users expressed their dissatisfaction. Facebook's market value dropped by $134 billion in the days following the scandal. Reports indicated a decline in user engagement on the platform. And then leftists are going to say that consumers don't have any control over customers. I would say a loss of $134 billion in the company is some amount of power that the consumers have. Then we have the Delete Uber campaign in 2017. During a taxi strike, Protesting President Trump's travel ban, Uber was accused of undermining the strike by continuing service and eliminating surging prices at the JFK airport. The hashtag #DeleteUber trended on social media, with thousands of users deleting the app in protest. Uber was perceived as unsupportive of the protest against the travel ban, leading to negative public sentiment. Uber saw a significant drop in its market share in the US as many users switched to competitors like Lyft. The company reported a loss of approximately 200,000 users during the Delete Uber campaign. Then we have Wells Fargo, the fake account scandal of 2016. It was revealed that Wells Fargo employees had created millions of fake accounts to meet sales targets, leading to significant customer harm. Customers felt deeply betrayed, leading to a loss of trust in the bank. The scandal attracted intense regulatory scrutiny and led to congressional hearings. Wells Fargo stocks dropped about 10% in the months following the scandal. The bank paid approximately $3 billion in fines and settlements. Wells Fargo's experienced a notable decline in the new account openings and saw a significant number of account closures. So, what's the short of it? Businesses are held to scrutiny by the market, by investors and consumers. If our Warlord trio tried to do anything that would jeopardize their relationship with the consumer, there would be immediate backlash. If the three powerful tycoons, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Bernard Arnault, engaged in any threatening or provocative actions, they would face immediate and severe backlash from both consumers and investors. Any aggressive actions or attempts at using force to take over territory would become major news stories covered extensively by all forms of media. The media would highlight the ethical, legal, and human rights violations, amplifying their negative perception. Social medias would explode with outrage, spreading the news rapidly and mobilizing public opinion against the tycoons. Hashtags calling for boycotts would trend, galvanizing widespread consumer action. Consumers would likely organize boycotts of Amazon, Tesla, and LVMH products, drastically reducing their sales. Historical examples like the Delete Uber campaign show how quickly and effectively consumers can mobilize against perceived wrongdoing. Protests and public demonstrations would add to the pressure, drawing even more negative attention. Trust in these brands would plummet. Consumers are increasingly value-driven and likely to avoid companies involved in unethical and violent behavior. The loss of consumer trust would lead to long-term damage and short-term damage to the brand's reputation. Investors would react quickly to the news about the company, and its profitability would sink. Aggressive actions by the tycoons would lead to a sharp decline in stock prices for Amazon, Tesla, and LVMH, as investors seek to avoid potential losses. Institutional investors and mutual funds, who often include ethical considerations in their investment decisions, would divest from these companies. This withdrawal of capital would further decrease their market value and financial resources. The companies would face increasing difficulty in raising capital for future products, hampering their growth and stability. So what's the short of it? They would lose their reputations. And then following this, they would lose their consumer and investor support. Okay, so nobody would buy from these companies. Nobody would invest in these companies. People would stay the hell away from these companies. And the reason why is because these companies want to violently take their things from them. Okay, so we would think that after all of this happens, they would go to war next, right? Well, there's another step involved with consumer and investor backlash, something that will occur still at the beginning of violent overthrows of the market. And this is dissociation. Are we really supposed to believe that while these massive companies are acquiring weapons and beginning to monopolize the market, the workers and managers in these businesses are really going to go along with everything without questioning their orders? Many leftists may think that people are just blindly obedient or not particularly intelligent. Leftists think that people are blindly obedient or completely stupid. But this isn't true. Workers are in fact generally quite intelligent and have a strong sense of morality and self-interest. For this violent overthrow to be successful, You would have to believe that the millions of workers within these companies are either incredibly naive or just as psychopathic as their leaders. But Bezos and Musk wouldn't just march up with bazookas, their workers would be the ones to take care of all the dirty work. This requires modern-day people to begin initiating non-aggravated violence, such as forcing people to give them money or take over their property. Realistically, how many people would actually comply with these orders? Do you really think that the vast majority of workers would actually forcefully take the property and impose taxation on their friends, family, and neighbors, even at the expense of their own moral and social standing? No. Most individuals have a sense of right and wrong. The idea of violently seizing property and enforcing authoritarian rule is against the moral compass of the majority. Workers have ties to their communities. They have ties to their families and friends. They would be extremely reluctant to harm these relationships by engaging in violent and coercive acts. Engaging in violent activities carries significant legal risks in the private market. There's no government anymore, but there are legal systems, and these legal systems exist all over the private market. They would fear the penalties of the consequences of breaking these rules, such as theft, murder, assault, things like this. They would have to contend with these legal rules. Workers and managers have their careers to consider. Again, reputation. These people would have to deal with the repercussions of reputations. They would have to know that when they're acting in the field, people are going to see them, people are going to know what's happening, and they're going to report this. So this is going to happen all over the place. We're going to be able to identify these people, who they are, where they work, where they live, who their family members with. This would be devastating to their reputations. Workers would question the profitability and sustainability of such actions. They would understand that violence leads to instability, which is not conducive to a long-term economic success. Employees are more likely to prioritize their own safety and well-being over the orders of a distant and increasingly out-of-touch leadership. Essentially, these people that work for these giant companies have a conscience. You may think that they don't have a conscience. You may think that they're a stupid robot, that the average American worker is a complete idiot. They don't understand anything. They're a big dum-dum. But no, this is incorrect, okay? I've worked with a lot of people in my past, and they're not big dum-dums, okay? They're smart people. There's certain things they don't understand about politics and the economy, but they're not stupid people. They just understand other things. They're not going to, if someone orders them to break down somebody's door or take somebody's money, they're not going to do this. Not to mention that people are going to see them. How will they be able to associate with their friends and families and also carry out this violence? How will they be able to, in the same day, kick down someone's door, go back home with their family, and like everything will just be all right? Like their family's okay with this, they're okay with this, millions of people are okay with this. No, this would never happen. Here's what would happen. Faced with orders to engage in unethical and violent behavior, many workers and managers would resign. They would prefer to leave their jobs rather than comply with such violent directives. The companies would quickly find themselves understaffed and unable to maintain normal operations, let alone carry out a violent overthrow. Employees may organize internally to resist such directives. Worker unions, advocacy groups, and whistleblowers would come forward to expose and oppose these actions. Internal sabotage and non-compliance would disrupt the company's plans and make it difficult to enforce any violent orders. Disaffected workers would likely go public with the unethical orders they received, leading to an even greater public and media outrage. The companies would face not only operational challenges, but also legal and private regulatory actions as the public demands accountability. The combined effects of mass resignations, internal resistance, and public backlash would lead to a collapse of the corporate structure. The companies would be unable to function effectively, let alone enforce authoritarian control. And now let's talk about some examples. The Google Project Maven of 2018. Google was involved in Project Maven, a Department of Defense initiative to develop AI for analyzing drone footage. Over 3,000 Google employees signed a petition to demand the company to pull out of the project. citing ethical concerns about contributing to warfare technology. At least a dozen employees resigned in protest over the project, unwilling to be a part of what they saw as a morally questionable endeavor. Google eventually decided not to renew its contract with the Pentagon, demonstrating the power of employee resistance. Amazon facial recognition technology in 2018. Amazon faced internal and external backlash for selling its recognition facial recognition technology to law enforcement agencies. Hundreds of Amazon employees signed a letter to CEO Jeff Bezos, demanding the company stop selling the technology to law enforcement and government agencies, highlighting concerns over privacy and misuse. Employees also advocated publicly, increasing pressure on the company to reconsider its position. The pressure led Amazon to implement a one-year moratorium on police use of recognition in 2020. Then we have the Facebook content moderation policies of 2019. Internal disagreements over Facebook's handling of political content and misinformation led to employee unrest. Dozens of Facebook employees staged a virtual walkout to protest the company's decision to not fact-check political ads and posts, especially those from politicians. Employees leaked internal discussions and documents to the media, exposing the ethical conflicts within the company. The public pressure and media scrutiny forced Facebook to reevaluate its content moderation policy. Now, if we're being realistic, any company, even this fictional, mega-powerful corporation, would not have survived any of these things we've already discussed. They would have their reputation destroyed, leading to a drop in their company value. Consumers and investors would drop off, and then they would leave. Most, if not all, of the workers would dissociate from the company, and this even includes the PMCs they would likely hire. They would have no reputation, no staff, and very little money. But let's say, for the sake of argument, they managed to get past all of these layers. For whatever reason, their reputation is still intact. Their investors are still on board, even though they won't be making any profits. Their staff still decides to stay, even though it assumes they are merely amoral, unintelligent automatons. Let's say that the PMCs they hired have no problem threatening and taxing innocents violently. These military companies neither care about morals, and they also don't care about profits. And this is all of these peoples associated with the company. What happens next? Well, it's time for war. War would never happen. But if it did, this might be how it looks. So the PMCs hired by the tycoons would move to secure key territories, like major cities, ports, industrial centers, as they outlined in their plan. They would use force to establish control and suppress any initial resistance. They would kick down doors, they would secure towns, they would point guns at people, they would say, "You owe us now, we're attacking you, you have to give us money when we want money." The tycoons would focus on seizing essential resources like energy supplies, transportation networks, and communication infrastructures. To maintain order, they would impose curfews, they would establish checkpoints to monitor and control the movement of people and goods. Advanced surveillance technologies, including drones and satellite monitoring, would be deployed to keep a close watch on the population to identify potential risks. Local resistance groups would then form, employing guerrilla tactics to disrupt the operations of the occupying forces. These groups would use their knowledge of the local terrain to conduce hit-and-run attacks, sabotage supply lines, and spread disinformation. The general populace would engage in acts of civil disobedience, such as strikes, protests, and refusal to comply with new regulations. This widespread non-cooperation would make it difficult, not impossible, it would make it difficult for the tycoons to enforce the rule. Hackers and digital activists would launch cyber attacks against the tycoons' infrastructure, targeting communication networks, financial systems, and surveillance equipment to disrupt their operations and gather intelligence. Social media and other online platforms would be used to coordinate resistance efforts, sharing information, and rallying support against the occupying forces. Despite their initial control, the continuous sabotage of supply chains and transportation networks would lead to severe logistical challenges, making it difficult to maintain a steady flow of resources and goods. The occupation would lead to shortages of essential goods, causing economic instability and hardship for the population. This would further fuel resistance and unrest. the high cost of maintaining a private military force, coupled with the economic impact of resistance activities, would quickly deplete the financial resources of the tycoons. Remember, they wouldn't be making a profit because violence is not profitable. Even in this unlikely scenario, the prolonged lack of profitability and increasing costs of maintaining control would eventually cause investors to lose confidence. Basically, they would be losing all of their money, and there's no ways to get new investors unless you say new investors decide to invest in the company, but they would be watching as this mega corporation has a stock that's been sinking for months and months now, and then they would decide to invest so that they could give the mega corporation more finances that they could, steal. So we're in pretty stupid territory. But even if new investors did come aboard, it would just be a matter of time before their money would also sink away into nothing. So at this point, there's no hope left. The mega corporation has lost all its finances. It can no longer fund the PMCs, its workers, and let's say for the sake of argument, the PMCs and the workers decided to work for free because they love being psychopaths, so they'll work for free. Well, guess what? The mega corporations can't even pay for electricity, they can't pay for food, they can't pay for really anything anymore because they would have no money left. All the money would be generated in the private market. And you could say that they try to tax the people that they've already, taken control over, but how many towns realistically would they have taken control over? Everybody would see this coming from a mile away. They would get prepared. They would begin combat immediately. And then this is when war would happen. They would battle it out. The mega corporation wouldn't just be able to roll into town and take over everybody and then take their resources. And even if they did take their resources, where would they work for money? All the other companies would distance themselves from this mega corporation. How would the mega corporation make money? They wouldn't make money. They could steal the money from the towns they roll into, but then that's money that's gone forever. Those people, what are they going to make those people do? Like go work in a mine or something? The rest of the entire market has distanced itself from the mega corporation. So there's no way that they can make profits anymore. And then we have a few other deterrents that we haven't even discussed. Market competition. Other corporations, even those not involved in direct conflict, would see the opportunity to capture market shares by positioning themselves as ethical and stable alternatives. They would likely collaborate to undermine the tycoons' efforts. Competitors would engage in aggressive pricing strategies and innovation to attract customers and talent away from the tyrannical corporations. Rivals will form alliances to pool resources and counter the aggressive actions of the tycoons, creating a formidable opposition. And this is just to say the insurance agencies would just decimate the mega corporation. Trade and industry associations would likely condemn the actions of the tycoons and support measures to isolate and undermine their operations. Consumers, having the freedom to choose, would switch to alternative brands and services. Brand loyalty would be severely impacted, leading to a significant loss of market share. Again, they would have no consumers and investors. Technological deterrence. The use of cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology would enable financial transactions that are independent of traditional banking systems, if we had any. If, theoretically, the mega corporations, which they couldn't, but if they did take over all banking institutions, we could still just rely on cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. And then we have the social and cultural factors, which we already kind of talked about. But a significant portion of consumers prioritize ethical considerations. These are human beings we're talking about. They care about ethics. Companies with strong CSR policies would attract consumers, further isolating the mega corporation. So yeah, basically warlord takeovers wouldn't work. Feel free to disagree, I guess. So if you disagree with anything that we covered in this video, I'm interested in hearing about it in the comments. Obviously, what we covered here isn't everything that would happen. These are probably just the major events and defenses I can think of. There would be far more moving factors, but it's really just to say that people aren't as stupid as the leftists think. Yeah, maybe most people don't know how economics and governmental operations carry out, but they know about the things that affect their lives. They're not going to blindly start murdering and stealing from people just because of a short-term profit incentive. I've heard Jordan Peterson say this before, that we can't be certain a normal person wouldn't end up like a Nazi, which I think is fair for, say, almost 100 years ago. But nowadays, we're living in a time where most people are educated about history and science and current events. They understand basic moral values, and they will not be easily convinced to carry out heinous crimes. Thanks for watching.